All right, here we are. Just talking about roughly five things you could do in this current economic situation to start generating, more profit potential, more income, and I think a lot of people in this economy there's kind of in that side gig mindset, but it's kind of getting back to people looking for real careers too as well, because I think a lot of people are realizing that side gigs don't really pay the bills consistently, if that makes sense. And wrong, you might make a bit of money sometimes, but this seasonal work and stuff like that can leave people, not economically as stable as they like to be. So, but a career also involves, maybe a lot of schooling and getting accepted at the right higher end facilities and management and so forth, right? Or starting your own business, right? Really is the idea. I think for a lot of people like to start their own business, yeah, and a lot of people have started what they call their own businesses, but for many of us, it's probably small time, right? We started a home services business, or we're doing, eBay, or maybe YouTube on some mediocre level or something like that, right? Whatever it is, it's just something to kind of explore, but maybe we're not taking them very seriously. We're not treating those things like careers, right? We're treating them like side gigs. So I think for a lot of people in this economy, it's all about finding focus, right? Finding your niche, of course, something that can hold your interest for a while, but varying your platforms and creating your own brand, right? And that's the thing a lot of people have done over the years to really, I think, explode. Not really that in a lot of ways. It's only a handful full of people, relatively speaking, that have built some of the biggest brands, right? And we're probably familiar with some of those brands. There's like entrepreneurs and Grant Cardone's and Gary Vee and big names in business and so forth, marketing, right? But building a brand, it happens on all kinds of different levels, right? It could be about a product, it could be about a personality, whatever that brand is. I think is what carries a lot of people long term to make their businesses into careers, right? So that's something I like, work on trying to focus on and learn. But at the same time, we want to have a mindset of trying to get some of those things in place quickly. If you're starting your business, you're probably thinking, well, a business entity, a business name, maybe even stuff like that to get your business actually set up officially as a business, like an LLC, or maybe even an S corp if you're doing something more higher investment or something like that. But just as an LLC is usually pretty straightforward for most people in most states. Pretty simple to set up. Might cost you a few bucks, but once you have your LLC business name entity, you can, depends on the name of your business, right? What is the category of your business? Maybe you can keep your business somewhat general and encompass a few things. And I'm not giving any legal advice. You want to talk to an attorney or taxes, stuff like that. You want to talk to a professional. But I'm just saying, as far as some of the general stuff, you can set up an LLC for your business, so you have an official business entity. You can do a DBA, but an LLC, it's really better to just go with an LLC from my perspective, from what I gather, right? Just from a layman's perspective. So, but if you want to start your own business entity and then think of ways you can bring profit into that business entity. Maybe it's selling physical goods, or maybe it's selling your own services. Maybe whether it's just some home service or house sitting, babysitting, whatever it is, right? That you're doing, roofing, whatever. You have a company, maybe you start like a medium-sized company, right? You can do some kind of residential home service or cleanup, right? Cleaning's always going on. There's always people that need cleaning of all different types, residential and commercial, right? So you could make a business that just starts offering, whatever jobs you feel like you could handle. Maybe you're just by yourself, maybe you are hiring helpers, or you have family or something like that. Is that like a career? I mean, it could be, but I think for a lot of people, they understand that, in many cases that could be a lot of work to do long term, right? Especially if you're doing like a lot of physical stuff yourself. That's certainly not like you should be afraid to do physical work. I'm not saying that, right? Certainly, I'd be open to it, but always have a backup plan, right? Just in case you couldn't, for some reason, do the physical work that you've done, maybe, right? All of a sudden, you have an injury or something like that, or some other reason, maybe you need to work from home because you have all of a sudden a child with special needs, or anything can happen, right? For different people in different scenarios. But what I'm saying is, it's sort of something you can do from where you're at to the best of your ability, right? Reasonably, and then build from there, right? Because you might only be able to expand so far in different ways because of your capabilities. So that's just a couple of thoughts. Setting up an LLC though will give you more of the mindset to say, hey, let me grow my business, right, and professionally, and keeping track of the book, getting better at doing that. And, if you're making some profits, hire an accountant. But until then, if you're not making that much money, you're making 20,000 or something like that. Like you can kind of just grow your business from there, maybe a little bit more. But before you get too intensive about, like I said, set up an LLC, establish stuff legally, above board. But at the same time, the main thing from there is getting some paying customers, right? Second thing from there is learning how to manage your money, right? Learning how to save and not spend your money and pay yourself first, right? Give yourself just the amount that you would pay yourself, like as if you were just working at a low-wage job or something like that. Don't be, so tempted to just spend your money, and you're going to have more money coming in. You never know when for whatever reason, this job doesn't come through, whatever it is, right? So you want to start having a plan B for your main primary, right? So do have a plan B or two lined up. Think of another business or two that you could either add to your current business, or maybe you have another job, right? Don't necessarily quit your job right away, right? Depending on what kind of time schedule you have. But be open to the idea of your project is your side story, your business is your side story, if you will, while your job is your main thing. Like, you like your job, you don't necessarily hate it, but you're working full-time on your business, or what would you say, full-time at your job and part-time on your business, if that makes sense, right? So, and if we've heard somebody like a famous entrepreneur, legendary entrepreneur, Mr. Jim Rohn, would say something along that lines, right? Work full-time on your job, part-time in your business, part-time in your fortune, right? Your dream, and maybe work it like that. That allows you to also keep maybe potentially networking while you're starting your business, because starting a business could be lonely, right? Depends on, do you have people with you who work in the business? That are you outgoing and gregarious? Are you getting employees or helpers right away? Or are you more like you're just trying to bring in profit yourself personally by making personal sales, or going out and doing jobs yourself or something like that, right? So there's just a couple of concepts. But like I said, getting paying customers is critical. You want to have some profit coming in, because that's going to allow you to keep going, right? That's what's going to allow you to keep going and keeping that profit coming in. Like I said, saving for any potential hard times, especially in the beginning, but really at all times, right? At all times, because even as your business grows, you have more stuff riding on the line. You never know when you might have to cover repair, or maybe you have a helper, and in some situation for whatever reasons they need to be paid a little more to do some certain work or whatever it is, right? So you want to have that extra money to make sure you're covered, right, financially with your business at all times, right? So just a couple of concepts there. But a big deal too, really focusing on getting those clients, is thinking about how you're going to market, right? How you're going to market them. Kind of maybe in many cases doing it from multiple facets. Depends what kind of business you're doing. Is it more of a direct selling business? Maybe you want to raise awareness about your product or service or business, right? Maybe you want to have direct selling going on, where people are like setting appointments or something like that. Maybe you have a location where you provide services, and you really just need to get more people walking in, if you will, right? Maybe like a mechanic shop or something like that, right? And maybe you feel like you're trying to load up more work. Many people get overloaded and they don't feel like they want to do anymore. That's where you're going to have to decide if you want to scale, or if you're happy with where you're at. But if you want to scale, yeah, you kind of want to think about that capacity ahead of time a little bit, right? Do I have a shop that would enable me to hire 2 or 3 helpers, or am I, stuff like that? Am I getting the phone system set up that would enable me to, allow for those extra helpers, or whatever it is that might be helping you expand your business? Maybe it's employees, maybe it's just technical systems, or a structure to your business, right? The structures of your business, right? So there's just a few concepts there. Yeah, but there's different tools too to help different businesses. There's all kinds of different business tools, right? So but there's probably a few fundamental business tools that go into a lot of businesses, like accounting types of tools, right? People, of course, tax, TurboTax, stuff like that, right? There's there's graphic design tools in many cases that, unless you're totally outsourcing that, you might be doing some of that kind of stuff yourself, or be involved with that at least, right? So graphic design, media, marketing, production, right? And marketing pieces, whether it's physical or virtual. There's a few different things that go into that, keeping it going, right? But Also, like you said, attacking your market, finding what your market is. I mean, if you're going out, maybe business is like a door-to-door type of business, and maybe it doesn't necessarily require a huge home office. Same time, you want to have structure there. I mean, if you want to have a business with a good number of employees, maybe you want to load up your business big time. You want to have 20 or 30 or 40 people working there real quick, or as sales reps or whatever it is. Then I think, hey, do I have a room to do I have the capacity for that basically in place? At least some reasonable amount of it, I mean, you don't want to be way bigger than what's expected. Like, if you have people showing up to a business meeting, you don't want to be like the room's real big and there's only 3 people in there, right? Same time, you don't want to have it to where like it's way overcrowded and there's no space at all, right? But you want it to be urgent about starting your business and launching your business and meeting with people and having sales presentations or business presentations or clients or whatever it is regularly. You're working through referrals and marketing through maybe some local media, maybe some, I don't do newspapers much anymore, but they got some stuff like that. But also your Facebook local stuff, Google Maps, different ways you can get on those different systems, which aren't always legit. So you want to be savvy at recognizing legitimate expenditures and advertising sources, lead sources, and stuff like that for your business, right? Be open to testing a little bit, but go to the fundamentals, right? What are the fundamentals? A few things that you need from open, like I said, accounting, some marketing department and development, if you will, right? Some customer service. Right, some production of product, the delivery of product or service, right, if that makes sense. So those few main things, as long as those few fundamental things are in place, everything else can kind of be, wrong. You want everything to be perfect, but I'm just saying, other little things can be a little less than perfect as long as your product is being delivered on time, right, and it's, under promising and over delivering. These are just a few concepts I would say. Hey, if you're starting a new business and you're thinking, hey, well, what can I do to maybe get my business off the ground? Think about it. Do I have enough inventory capacity to serve? What kind of job? What do I have the capacity for? Can I do big jobs of such and such type, or do I know how to build huge fences? Maybe I can build the small fences, or whatever it is, and start with where you're at and what you have available to you now, and don't overcommit. Right? Don't overcommit. I said, hey, look, I don't know if I can do that. I'll do what I can, under promise and over deliver as much as you can to the best of your ability. Under promise and over deliver. So these are just a few concepts, like you say, just a few ideas. Like maybe some other video I could talk about more tools that you could use for different kinds of businesses. I don't know every tool out there in the marketplace, but I know a few key ones that can be helpful for, making more personal sales. If you like to work on the phone, stuff to help you maybe with if you're doing like online listings like eBay, Facebook, stuff like that, and you're trying to sell, physical inventory, which I recommend, honestly. I recommend kind of focusing on low inventory types of businesses, smaller types of inventory businesses that, don't require a lot of storage, a lot of shipping, stuff like that, right? But you have to look at profit margins. I mean, what's the best profit margins, right? Margin. Do I have a reasonable amount of profit margin in what you're trying to do, right? Can you reasonably come up by a few $100 and, by making a sale or whatever it is, right? Is the profit margin decent for the input that you're giving it? So, like I said, let me know if you maybe get anything out of this. Just a few concepts here, nothing real in depth or highly advanced. But I think for a lot of people, starting their own business is a little daunting because they don't know how to step away from their job, or they don't know how to maybe even go about maybe the legal components, stuff like that, right? You want to talk to an attorney if you feel like there's anything that's really heady about it. But for the most part, you probably get, like I said, the basics down in your state by just finding out some basic questions from locals or other business owners. But for the most part, big time, especially when it comes to paying your taxes, etc., I recommend talking to an attorney about all that stuff. So, but anyway, let me know if you got anything out of this, and maybe in the meantime, if you see a link to another video, maybe it'll check it out, and maybe we'll see you in another video. In the meantime, of course, if you contribute to this video or drop me a line or comment or anything that you felt was really helpful for you under these same circumstances, starting any particular businesses that you were starting or successfully started, or any experiences you had, by all means leave me a comment. In the meantime, maybe check out my next video. All right, thanks for listening, and see you next time. Bye bye.